Hello, my name is Ryan Bassant, and I'm going to be going through the topic of social engineering with you today. So, here are the three main objectives of this presentation. The first is to understand the concepts of social engineering, followed by recognizing the vectors, tactics, and attack types used by attackers. And then finally, we'll recognize defenses to reduce business risk of social engineering. So, what is social engineering? Social engineering is any act that influences a person to take an action that is not in their best interest. So, you can think of an email or message you receive that asks for personal information, or it could be as simple as a family or friend wanting you to get a cup of coffee or muffin for them. So, social engineering can be either malicious or ethical. Both have the same objective, but they have different intent. So, if a social engineering attack were to be malicious, they're trying to get unauthorized access in a not limited, and they're not limited by time, and they do not work within the law. Versus an ethical social engineering test, they normally have a contract that defines what they're allowed to do, the time frame they have to do it in, and who conducted the test. And they normally have to confine with the law. So the two types of social engineering can be remote and physical, where remote can be where a social engineer attempts to gain access via a communication system, and then a physical being a social engineer attempts to gain access to a physical location. So I'm just going to expand on physical social engineering. The following list contains some of the methods and attacks that can be used to conduct the physical social engineering attack, like tailgating, piggybacking, physical security gaps, dumpster diving, and distraction attacks. So essentially, you can use impersonation or false pretenses as well to disguise yourself as a member of staff who may have forgotten their access key to get in. You're trying to basically piggyback off another person that has an access key to get in. You could try tailgating when they're not looking. You just try sneaking in behind them. Physical security gaps. If there is no cameras, you could try to just go in without being caught, like to unauthorized rooms. Dumpster diving, you're basically going through the trash to find confidential material, and distraction attacks is basically there is a distraction going on to get the attention of whoever it is in the room to look away whilst you go in and try to grab information or go into unauthorized access room. So remote SE can be done with the following communication systems like email, telephone, social networking, and instant messaging. I'll go on a little bit further into that with the attack vectors, but any means of communication can basically be used to perform remote social engineering. Why does social engineering work? Well, social engineers are experts in human nature and they know how to prey on weaknesses to deceive and manipulate victims. People are trusting, they're curious, they like free stuff, and people are unaware. Normally, we have a tendency to trust, we want to help, we respect authority. So we'll go on to see principles of influence that authority can be used as a means to get a victim to comply. Um, Essentially, the trust triggers are what the social engineers use to get you to trust them. Essentially, it breaks down into the SPICE model, which simply stands for simplicity, perceived self interest, incongruity, confidence, and empathy. So, simplicity would just mean we tend to trust short, simple messages which are quick to process, making people think they are true. Short and sharper messages are more likely to convince a listener. So, next we have perceived self interest. A social engineer was basically trying to convince their target that complying with their request would be good for them. It may be offering something of value, like a winning a trip or a favor, knowing that you could call in the favor later on. Incongruity is basically breaking the pattern, causing an out of ordinary response. So you could think of call centers where they follow a script. If you can get them to break off of that script, you could get a response that is out of the ordinary because you're no longer following that strict pattern. Next, we have confidence. If you act big, people will believe you are. So if you show confidence, people will tend to trust you because you know what you're doing and know what you're talking about. Empathy convinces basically the targets that they are concerned about themselves and evoking a sense of empathy in their targets, so the targets end up concerned about the social engineer. That's how that really plays out. Along with these trust principles, we have principles of influence, which get broken down into six main principles. There are more, but these are the most common. So you have reciprocity, where people tend to return a favor. A common idea that follows this principle is good cop, bad cop, where somebody will come in pretending to be a bad cop. They'll be harsh and everything, and then the good cop comes in, offers up a good deal only if the victim complies. Next, we have commitment and consistency. People tend to honor commitments they make orally or have written down. Once there is a commitment, people expectations would like to remain the same as the previous experience. So as long as you commit to a scenario, as long as you continue going through with this and the outcome doesn't change, it's more likely to be believable. So here we have social proof as the third method or influence. People will do what others do in situations they are not familiar with. Social proof depends on both uncertainty and similarity. So let's take a tip jar, for example. If a tip jar was empty, you're more than not likely not to tip when you're in line for like a coffee or something. But if you do see the jar is full, you'll think that people have been donating or giving a tip, and then it would be good on your behalf to give a tip as well because that's what everyone else is doing. So for authority, people tend to listen and obey people of authority even when they don't want to. So this goes for parents, your boss. It can be legal terms like you'd comply with peace officers or judges. There's also organizational. So I believe like your boss homeschools, you have like a teacher, somebody that has higher authority that you have to basically follow. There's social authority where there's like the leader of the friend group. There's mob psychology. People are influenced by the actions taken by other members of the group. You have social figures like people who are wealthy, um, like the influencers. They're your authorities when it comes to a social aspect. But basically, anyone with authority basically has that presence where people will follow because they're in a position where which lets them do what they want. For liking, basically people are persuaded by those they like. People are more likely buy from a person they like that's selling to them that versus somebody that they don't really find is pleasant to be around. And then the final topic is or principle is scarcity. Basically, scarcity presents a demand and a sense of urgency. So you'll see this a lot with stores. They'll do like limited time offer. Get now. There's only like 500 in stock. Whatever it is, they create this sense of urgency and presence that there is a demand for this product, even if there wasn't to begin with. So attackers will use a variety of vectors to basically go through with their attack. This can include phishing, smishing, vishing, and impersonation, but it doesn't have to be limited to these, but these are very common methods. So phishing, basically an attacker sends a fake email pretending to be a trustworthy figure. Smishing, they basically send messages through SMS or and it's going to be consisting of fake links or requests for personal information. Vishing would be through calls, trying to gain access to personal, maybe even financial information. Impersonation is basically an attacker pretending to be someone else. So with those vectors in mind, there's a few different attack types that attackers like to use. There is angler phishing, baiting, bulking phishing, business email compromise, double barrel attacks, impersonation, QR code phishing, smishing, vishing, water holding. There's like a fine line between the types and the techniques, but I'm trying to go to describe some of these to you right now. So anglerfishing basically is someone posing as maybe like a customer support representative trying to um, interact with the target under the pretext of helping them whilst trying to extract information. Baiting is basically where the attacker involves leaving malware infected portable media and locations for other people to pick them up and then basically deploy an attack on their machine. Bulking phishing is the simplest, where they just send large numbers of attacks with generic messages with the hopes of a small audience actually falling for it. Business email compromise is where an attack is using impersonation to basically act as if they were a organization which they had compromised. So they could spoof the email or actually compromise that email and use it for their attack. Double barrel attack is a phishing technique where they basically commit to the attack. They don't actually send the attack at the beginning. They do some non-suspicious emails, and then over time they slowly build trust, and then they deploy their attack to extract information and influence the user. Impersonation is basically pretending or pretexting to be another person, trying to gain physical access to a system or building is the most common case. QR code phishing, basically the information encoded in QR codes can be used to open a URL, send a text message, compose an email. You'll see this attack a lot with Discord because Discord, you can sign in with QR codes. So people will send the QR code thinking you are logging into your device, but you're actually logging into their phishing site. Smishing, we went through it. It's basically targets are sending SMS messages, trying to pretend they're a trustworthy source, trying to basically request personal information. Phishing is done through phone calls, but essentially same goal where they're trying to extract personal information or trying to gain financial. And last, we have a water holding where targeting of a website used by a specific group of users. The basically um, they insert like malware into an aviation site or any type of site, and the target will inadvertently download a credential harvesting software or any other malicious software, and basically try to extract that, and it goes back to the attacker, which they can then use to compromise the network. So there are quite a bit of techniques that go along with attacks. They're not always used, but these are some common ones that you can find out when you're doing your daily things. So there is CEO fraud, caller ID spoofing, clickbait, email spoofing, homograph attacks, pretexting, stenography, tailgating, typo squatting. um, Basically, CEO fraud is a type of the business email compromise where the attacker is trying to pretend to be the CEO. They use a compromised or spoofed email address, and then they make payment requests to an employee and use their authority to actually have the payments issued. Caller ID spoofing is a type of phishing attack. Numbers will appear to be uh, from a trusted caller ID, but it's actually the fake attacker. Clickbait, a website URL email attachment, seems to be from a trusted source. However, when they click on it, it goes to the fake source set up by the malicious actor. We have email spoofing, which is forging an email header. It makes an email appear to come from a legitimate or friendly source. It's basically used to evade spam filters or part of a identity theme scheme. Homograph attacks, their domains can use multiple alphabet letters and different alphabets look identical so that they try to change it from one alphabet to another to think you're accessing the real domain when you're really not. Next, we have pretexting, which is again acting as a legitimate website or communication in order to acquire sensitive information. Followed by that, we have stenography, which is basically hiding information within a image. Tailgating is following someone into a secured area. That is basically a physical social engineering attack technique. And then typo squatting is where a hacker can register a domain name that is similar to the established one. Basically, if you have a domain and you're going to, let's say, Adobe to sign in, you accidentally mistype, you load up a fake Adobe site, you sign in, that person could then get credentials to your actual Adobe account, and they could probably end up getting your credentials as well because Adobe requires credentials to use their Creative Cloud software. And if you input that on their fake site, they will now have your credentials and your financial information. Some more techniques include clone phishing, domain spoofing, dumpster diving, lateral movement, shoulder surfing, URL shortening, and website forgery. Clone phishing is basically where the target has previously received an email from a legitimate business. The text or graphics of the email is copied and resent. The new message will have fake content with fake links as well. Domain spoofing is the creation of a domain that looks similar to a legitimate website. The victim logs into the spoof website with the real credentials, and then the attacker can use the credentials. Dumpster diving is another physical technique where the attacker can basically go through dumpsters, waste bins, recycling, and so on to find emails, invoices, company memos, and so on, which are all technically could be having confidential information. This can also involve the collection and analysis of electronic waste items like old computer system, memory devices, smartphones that may not have been wiped potentially, and they could try getting information out of that. Then we could go to lateral movement where they're trying to move across the network. These type of attacks basically illustrate why IT security should encompass every department and every individual of an organization. Shoulder surfing is a type of physical attack where someone's like literally observing through either being right there, they're trying to see maybe a pin, password you're entering, or other information. They could also be using hidden cameras if they're not in the room to observe what you may be entering in or other confidential data. Then we could go to URL shortening. That's basically instead of having long URLs, sometimes they're shortened. Especially in an email, you don't want to show the full thing. You'll create like the hyperlink. Social engineers will basically try to hide a malicious website address because it makes the link more difficult for the user to analyze. Um, then we have website forgery, which is basically a fake website that looks legitimate or a replica of a legitimate site, which basically, again, tricks the user into giving up sensitive information. So, an attack cycle basically follows the four steps. So, a social engineering attacker will basically start off by identifying their target. Once they have chosen a target at an organization or maybe just a random target, if it's like a specific targeted attack, they'll start to gather information to formulate their attack. That includes basically finding any information they could use during a pretext. So, what are their interests? What are their hobbies? Where do they like to go? So on, or maybe where they work, and then from there, they'll plan an attack based on the information gathered. They'll choose their attack vector. They'll create their message, their backstory. They'll basically bait the victim, and then they'll deploy their attack. That's where they hook them in. They get whatever information they need. whether that's specific confidential information or financial information. And then once they get that, they move on to their next target. And then it just continues that cycle. Some tools that can be used to basically perform social engineering can consist of the harvester, the Wayback Machine, Google hacking database, social media, target websites, geolocation, metadata, Metagoofle, Google, Shodan, VoIP, caller ID spoofing, and the social engineering toolkit, but it's not limited to these, but these are very common tools that can be used. W- The harvester basically gathers information like email, subdomains, hosts, employee names, open ports, banners. It can also use public sources like search engines and the Showdown computer database. Mo- um, let's see. The Google hacking database is like Google hacking or Google dorking. We're basically using um, these terms to basically filter out your search to get a more targeted list of results. The Wayback Machine is used to find maybe old information that wasn't considered sensitive back in the day, but now is. So they changed their website to hide that information. But sometimes it gets recorded and you could find it archived in the Wayback Machine. Uh, Metadata, you could basically go through files like a document, an Excel sheet, pictures, and so on. You could try to see what software was used, who created it, what time, what edits have been made, and so on. VoIP you can use to basically deliver your phishing attack. You could you do ID spoofing. You could pretend to be someone else over a call, making it look as if you were um, the person in your pretext. You could use Google, which is like just a normal search. Social media, you look up the person that you're trying to find interest about to create and set up your backstory. Geolocation is basically building a profile about their location, personal habits, and activities where they would probably like to go out if they like going on trails. Maybe they like doing specific activities like going to a skate park or going to theme parks. A lot of time you could use like Facebook as people like to check in and show, hey, I've been here. Hey, I've been at this event. They checked in saying I was here this date because Facebook just gives them the opportunity and they like to share it with others. And we have things like Shodan, which is a search engine which integrates ports, grabs banners, indexes the banners. It can help you look for routers, servers, and other devices like that. It gives you maps, so like you could find the postal code of whatever device it is you are looking at. You can find online storage devices, surveillance cameras, webcams, VoIP systems. Um, yeah, so these are just some tools that are commonly used within the social engineering. So some defensive steps that are commonly used include these 6 steps, which is identifying attacks, responding to attacks, policies, controls, education, audits, and testing. So essentially, we'll go through each one. Where identifying attacks, you have the best technical controls, latest firewalls, most expensive IDS. An attacker can just get past all of those just because they social engineered one of your staff. So if they are able to identify attack and they know, hey, let's look for suspicious headers or links, or maybe this person's never contacted me before, or the email address looks similar but something's off and you're not quite sure, maybe take some extra precautions. Um, so they need to understand what social engineering is, that it exists, and everyone is always capable of falling risk to an attack. Um, if they're able to be educated on it, they should be able to identify it. Um, it's still a possibility that they could fall for an attack, but it's better that everyone's prepared to identify it and it's done on a regular basis. Then we could go to responding to attacks, encourage staff to basically report suspicious behaviors, simple procedures in place for staff to follow. Maybe like, hey, forward this to ITS just in case you're not sure if this is spam, and then delete it from your mailbox. If you think it's a target, maybe you should try using a different method to contact the person that's reaching out to you just to verify the information. Have policies put in place, procedures for reporting an SE attempt, information um, regarding how to inform colleagues of the attack, and verify with owners, basically, just to make sure you are in compliance. You need to have probably like a log to just say um, who it was, what their role, what their department was, what time did they fall for the attack, a description of the attack, how it was handled, and was it successful just in case it was, what information was gathered within that attack. So for policies, it should be addressing realistic challenges your base faces and has faced in the past, and it should be readily available to staff, written so the targets can easily understand it, and include sanctions for non-compliance. So if people aren't following these policies, there should be something put in place to basically um, ensure everyone follows it, and there's circumstances if they don't. Some key policy relevance to social engineering is like data classification, waste management, acceptable use, network access, remote access, and physical security, just to make sure um, we know the appropriate users are accessing information. If any information is being disposed of, it is done so in a manner that is like shredding the paper up, and if it's a device, we're wiping it and sanitizing it, ensuring nothing is left before tossing it away. Uh, Controls, make sure there's physical and technical controls. So you'll have um, basically IDs if you're trying to enter a building, you have security cameras around the building, you have maybe security guards, depending on what information's at the desk. Um, you need to have a clear desk and not leaving out sensitive information anywhere. You should probably ensure trash is in a specified area. So, like, you know how they have some trash areas locked off, so that way it's only accessible during times for trash pickup. You have stuff like that. Information is shredded and taken care of appropriately. You have firewalls and other um, devices set up on your network to detect attacks if there is any um, abstract things going on. Then you have education, which basically you have a security awareness program to have them know about physical controls, technical controls, and staff awareness. You train staff on the dangers of social engineering, and it should be in a manner where the audience can understand, it's up to date and meaningful. It should be included basically when a new employee joins your program. There should always be training courses available along with workshops. You can have internal communications. I know my last job I was working, they had internal communications going on every week, just like a newsletter or whatever, and it had just, hey, keep this in mind. We're doing these updates to our security protocols or whatever. We have a security awareness event, right? It's good to just have people going to these things and having them aware of these things on a constant basis. That way, it's always in their mind. And then we have auditing and testing. So sometimes you get like a third party to perform a social engineering test just to make sure no one is falling for these tests. So in conclusion, basically I went through the concepts of social engineering, the attack vectors, tactics, principles used. So we know that they can use trust like spice. They can use the six principles of influence. They can use phishing, vishing, smishing, and so on. And then there's the 6 different steps to basically defend and reduce business risk for social engineering. If anyone wants to basically do some additional readings just to get a better understanding for the tools, tactics, and techniques, the book by S. Conhedy called Social Engineering and IT Security Tools, Tactics, and Techniques is a great reading to basically understand the tools, tactics, and techniques used in social engineering in a better manner. I may not have explained it to the best of my abilities, but if you go ahead and read that, that is one helpful tool. Another good way to understand the principles of social engineering is Learn Social Engineering. That's by Oscar E. And that basically concludes my presentation on social engineering.